Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain blindness. This movie tells the story of a city ravaged by an epidemic of instant white blindness. Those first afflicted are quarantined by the authorities in an abandoned mental hospital where the newly created Society of the Blind quickly breaks down. Criminals and the physically powerful prey upon the weak, hoarding the meager food rations and committing horrific acts. What will happen to those who are blind, and how will they survive? Let's find out in Blindness. Blindness begins in the morning on a busy highway. However, a car does not move even though the red light has turned green. Upon investigation, it turned out that the driver of the car experienced sudden blindness. Luckily, a man was willing to help him drive home. The blind man said that there was something strange about his blindness because his vision was completely white. Hearing the complaint, the helper just said maybe it was just the effect of anxiety. Arriving in front of the apartment, the blind man was ushered up to his house, but the man who helped him was presumptuous. He rushed in and offered to accompany the blind man until his wife arrived. The blind man refused the offer and sent him away. Not long after, the blind man's wife came. She panicked after learning about her husband's condition and immediately took him to an ophthalmologist. But unfortunately, their car was stolen by the helper. The couple was forced to take a taxi to the eye doctor. After being examined, the doctor said that the blind man's eyes were fine. The doctor was confused because what happened to the blind man was really strange and had never happened before. He finally gave a referral letter to the hospital to continue his treatment. Meanwhile, the rescuer had to leave his stolen car after he saw a police raid on the street. But not long after, he experienced the same thing with the man he had helped earlier. His eyes went blind. He was then rescued by the police and escorted to his home. In another place, a prostitute serving her customers was also affected by the same disease. The girl was hysterical and ran out of the hotel room, but was soon rescued by a man who happened to run into her. The ophthalmologist had just come home from work and enjoyed dinner and talking to his wife. But when he woke up the next morning, his vision suddenly turned completely white. He assumed that the blindness had been transmitted from his patient. He then told his wife to stay away so as not to get infected. The doctor's wife immediately contacted the hospital. On that day, the number of blind people increased. Due to many reports of sudden blindness, patients were quickly taken to quarantine, including the doctor. The doctor's wife, worried about her husband's condition, then pretended to be blind to be allowed into the ambulance. As more people became blind, the government designated the mysterious disease as a pandemic called the White Disease. At the quarantine place, the doctor asked his wife to get out of there, but his wife refused. Not long after, several patients arrived. These are the people we see at the beginning of the story when the disease first broke out. They were all placed in the first ward with the doctor and his wife. The first blind man and the man who stole his car got into a fight. The thief accused him of transmitting the blind disease, while the first blind man was still angry that his car was stolen by him. The fierce struggle finally ended after the doctor managed to temper their anger. That day, a small child who also occupied the first ward whined because he wanted to go to the toilet. The doctor's wife, still pretending to be blind, suggested that they go together. She actually had time to walk around and know where the toilet is. She escorted the child while memorizing the number of steps to the toilet. However, the situation becomes chaotic as the car thief tries to harass the prostitutes as they go toward the toilet. The woman immediately kicked the thief's leg until it bled. The child, no longer able to hold his pee, finally peed in his pants. The next morning, several more patients arrived, one of whom was the wife of the first blind man. After that, the doctor and his wife went to see the guard to ask for antibiotics. They want to treat the injured man's leg so it doesn't get infected. Instead of being given medicine, they were rudely told to go back into the ward. The patient's cell phones were also confiscated before they entered the ward. There is only one public telephone that can be used in an emergency. The doctor's wife then called the ward guard to ask for additional food because supplies were running low. Even though it's actually not only food, the stock of medicine and the first aid kit is decreasing. Meanwhile, new patients arrived, and among them was the ophthalmologist's receptionist. Ward 1 is getting full, making it difficult for the doctor's wife to take care of the garbage there. This condition is exacerbated by patients who defecate because they do not know where the toilet is. To make it easier for the patient, the doctor's wife made a rope connecting the wards there. While the doctor's wife was taking a shower, she heard a radio sound from a distance. The voice came from the radio belonging to the man wearing the eye patch. The doctor's wife took the man into the ward, because before, he had slept near the toilet. The man then gave the latest news to the patients there which he had heard on the radio. In the first 24 hours, there have been hundreds of cases of blindness, and the government immediately quarantined the people who were affected by the white disease. Meetings and seminars have also been held by experts, but they have not found the cause of the outbreak. Panic ensued after an official caught the white disease in the middle of a meeting. Chaos began to spread in society. Accidents happened everywhere. There were even 2 planes that crashed that day. This situation created mass fear and made people afraid to leave their homes. Ironically, the Minister of Health also contracted the white disease. All the patients who heard the news grew desperate. To lighten the mood, the man with the eye patch put on a song on his radio. A few days later, the authorities brought a large number of patients into quarantine. There were so many of them that they had to push each other to enter the building. Surprisingly, none of the officers helped direct them. Even the officers on duty opened fire on patients who left the line. In the morning, the patients asked the guards to provide shovels to bury the people who had been shot dead. The guard granted it, on the condition that only one patient could take the shovel. The doctor's wife then came out into the field pretending to be blind and asked the officer to show the direction where the shovel was. Instead of telling, the guards played with the doctor's wife. In response, the doctor's wife took the shovel and pointed her middle finger at the guard. Luckily, she wasn't suspected. As the elected chairman of the first ward, the doctor asked the residents of other wards for help in burying the patient who was shot dead. He also suspected that one ward was taking more food rations than the others. Therefore, the doctor gave a suggestion to form a committee. But before the doctor could finish speaking, a man rejected the proposal. He doesn't like the fact that the doctor is the leader. The man is the leader of Ward 3 who crowned himself as the king of Ward 3. In the evening, the doctor's wife took care of her husband as usual. In addition, she also checked the condition of the car thief whose injuries were getting worse due to infection. But suddenly, the man pulled the doctor's wife's shirt and said that he knew she could still see. The car thief then came out of the ward to ask for help. He kept shouting for the officers, who then immediately looked for the source of the sound. But because it was too dark, the guards couldn't see anything. Instead of having his leg treated, the car thief was shot dead. The next day, the first ward patient buried the body of the car thief and another person. Seeing the cruelty of the officers, the doctor's wife plans to reveal her secret to the patients so that it is easier to help them. But the doctor did not agree, because he was afraid that his wife would become a slave to all the patients. Meanwhile, the king of Ward 3 and one of his subordinates managed to enter the communication room. He announced that all patients had to pay for food, because all food supplies had been sabotaged by him. The king of Ward 3 then sang like a madman. After that, the distribution of food to the patients became chaotic. They scrambled for food, but quickly backed off when they saw the king of Ward 3 brandishing his gun. He reiterated that other wards had to pay if they wanted to get food. Then one of the patients asked them the price they had to pay and how it was distributed. Since they had no money, any valuables could be given away. The king of Ward 3 and his minions would then decide on the proper portion of food for the items. The people in Ward 1 did not accept the dictatorship of the leader of Ward 3, but they had no other choice. The doctor's wife then collected the valuables belonging to the first ward patient. After that, the representatives of Wards 1 and 2 came to Ward 3 to get food. Ward 2, which usually received 4 boxes of food, was only given 3 boxes, while the doctor who represented the first ward only got 2 boxes. The doctor of course complained that the food would not be enough. He then said that the king of Ward 3 and his subordinates are immoral humans. But he soon got a gun pointed before being kicked out of the place. The occupants of the first ward ended up having to share one meal for 2 people. The doctor, who was still upset about the incident, rudely refused when his wife fed him. After everyone finished eating, the prostitute forced the doctor to eat. But the doctor still refused. He felt guilty that he should be able to take the king of Ward 3's gun and fight him. But according to the woman, doing so would only lead to more chaos. The two of them grew closer like lovers. Unfortunately, the scene was also seen by the doctor's wife. Suddenly the doctor felt guilty and apologized to his wife. Instead of being angry, the doctor's wife tried to understand the situation and calm the woman. The doctor's wife also told her that her eyes could still see. A week passed, the king of Ward 3 announced a new rule. Since all of the patients' valuables had been handed over, he stated that now the occupants of the other wards had to hand over the women to get food rations. The women in Ward 1 certainly don't want to turn themselves in, and neither does the doctor, who doesn't want to sell his wife for food. But the doctor then returned the decision to the women, because after all, they all had to keep eating in order to survive. The situation was suddenly silent. The occupants of Ward 1 were clearly confused and didn't know what to do. But the silence was broken after a woman volunteered. Several other women began to follow her, including the doctor's wife. The first blind man forbade his wife to sell herself, but he gave up after being given understanding by his wife. Not long after, people from Ward 3 came and checked the women who were there. The king of Ward 3 gave some bread as a down payment, then brought 9 women from Ward 1. They marched towards the third ward very resignedly. One by one, they fell victim to the immoral lusts of the men there. Even so cruelly, there is one woman who died. The next day, the doctor's wife, disgusted by the cruelty, came to the third ward with scissors. There, she saw the lecherous men having sex with the women from the second ward. She sneaked in and stabbed the king of Ward 3 to death. That action almost got her shot, but she managed to escape in the end. She threatened to kill them one by one if they continued to act arbitrarily. This reckless action made all the patients worried because it would be tantamount to triggering a war, while piles of food were still in the third ward. One of the residents of the first ward thought that if the third ward did not want to hand over the food, then they had to take the food themselves. Everyone agreed and immediately drew up a plan. But suddenly, the power went out, and this is where the doctor's wife finally admitted that she could actually see normally. They then began to gather wood as weapons, and with the doctor's wife, led them onto Ward 3. In the third ward, a woman crept in the dark and then burned the mattress. Flames immediately took over the place, making the man holding the gun kill himself. The doctor's wife helps people who can still be saved to get out into the field. She shouted for the officers, but strangely that night, there was not a single officer on duty. She then opened the unlocked gate and freed the patients. The next morning, the doctor's wife led her husband and a few people from Ward 1 into a town that looked deserted and untidy, with many blind people wandering around. They finally arrived at a shophouse, and the doctor's wife then asked them to stay there. After that, she went to look for food while accompanied by her husband. On a street, they saw normal people and blind people fighting for food. The couple finally arrived at the supermarket. The doctor's wife then asked her husband not to go anywhere while she went around looking for food. There was a lot of trash in the supermarket, and there was no food left on the shelves. The doctor's wife then went down the stairs and looked for the remaining food stock in the supply warehouse. Having not eaten for days, she greedily devoured the food there. Having managed to get a lot of food from the warehouse, people there flocked to her because they smelled meat. Her husband, who heard the commotion, immediately came to help. They finally left with a lot of food. But on the way, the doctor decided to go back to the supermarket to pick up his jacket he left behind while his wife waited in front of a building. Soon it started to rain, and the doctor's wife walked into a church where a group of people seemed to be in quarantine. The atmosphere inside was so gloomy and filled with despair. After the doctor came, they went to the shop where the group was. On the streets, people looked up to the sky, enjoying the rain and drinking it. After spending the night at the shophouse, the doctor's wife took the group to her house in order to find more suitable shelter. Since the electricity and the water lines were still out, the women bathed in the rain. They looked very happy. In the evening, after dinner and a heart-to-heart talk, the relationship between the first blind man and his wife began to improve, and so did the doctor and his wife. At the end of the film, the doctor's wife is preparing coffee for her husband and the first blind man. But when she poured the coffee into the cup, the first blind man's sight miraculously recovered. They were all happy, because he was the first to have the white disease. That means their eyesight will all return to normal. The doctor's wife was relieved, because she didn't have to take care of everything alone. The film ends. The message of this film is that no matter how bad the situation we are in, we must keep fighting, regardless of the ending we get. After all, life is all about struggle.